Hello and welcome to episode 67 of PubShorts, titled Once Upon a Time in the West. The title is kind of obvious as to what we are talking about. My name is Dr. KK. I am the Innovation Officer at Trinca and Inago, and I have with me Tony. Hi, Tony.
Hi, KK. What an interesting title for this week's episode,
Well,
really, and how relevant it is at the moment.
yes, it is very relevant because most of the news stories around the academic publishing world revolve around either what Trump is doing or what AI vendors are doing or research integrity related. And today we are talking about what's happening in the US research, I guess, arena.
Yeah, and I think it's difficult for most of us in Europe to really believe and understand quite what's going on. The sort of almost like fairy tale turned horror of US science funding. It's unbelievable. So I think I'm happy to be talking about some of these impact, some of these stories, and how it has impact on researchers.
Right, right, right. So, Tony, please introduce yourself and explain why we have chosen this title for the episode.
Well, as I said, I'm Tony O'Rourke, by the way. I'm Vice President for Partnerships here in Inago. We've chosen this title because we want to look at, how sort of the changes in US research is impacting, in research funding is going to impact Western research.
Right.
Fascinating, scary times.
Indeed. And if please, I think you have introduced yourself. Maybe you can introduce Pop Shots as well. That'll be good.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
So PubShorts is a regular, as you see, this is episode 67, so very regular podcast which KK and I record where we discuss topics related to the world of research and research communication. This is episode 67. You can find all previous 66 episodes over on our YouTube channel. Just search for the PubShorts playlist. And I would encourage you to press like, to press share with your colleagues, and comment on any of these videos. And we'd love to hear suggestions and ideas from you as to what we should be talking about in future.
Right, Tony. So we are referring to the Dire Straits song. Where does Dire Straits rank in your list of
Um,
bands?
okay, yeah, that's a difficult question. I think at the time when they first came out, I didn't like them so much. I liked the first album. I liked the album where this came from. I think
Uh-huh.
that was because it was so different. But then it all became a bit generic in my mind somehow.
Mhm.
But looking back, you just hear how fantastic the guitarist Mark Knopfler is
Yeah.
and still is,
Yes.
and how he sort of shapes that music and still produces some absolutely wonderful music.
Right.
So I think I appreciate them now being an old bald man compared to when I was hairy and young in my youth.
Well, I think we have briefly talked about the best riffs, best Knopfler riffs, and at that point in time, I think you were disappointed in me saying that I think "Money for Nothing" is my favorite.
Oh, oh
Yeah.
no. It's a fun song, but
Yeah.
there are so
No, I'm
many
talking
better
about the
songs.
riff, the chops. I mean, to have the guitar played like that, it's fun. But anyway, this is
Anyway,
a
moving on.
scholarly publishing podcast anyway, and we are talking about the news stories related to the executive orders from the Trump administration. And let's start with the first one, which is a Nature news article titled "Exclusive: NSF stops awarding new grants and funding existing ones." So the title is self-explanatory. So we are talking about the U.S. National Science Foundation, and the apart from stopping funding, existing grants won't receive additional funds until further notice. And NSF will screen grant applications for compliance with agency priorities. So some NSF staff have resigned in protest of the new policies. And Tony, we have talked about this. I have a friend who is affected by just the exact thing that we are talking about. It is overall bad news for the US researchers as well as the global research community because a lot of research is dependent on such funding.
Yeah, I can't add to that. There is a huge interdependence between research organizations around the world, and anything that impacts on research like this is going to impact globally.
Right, right. Moving on to the next story, again another news article from Nature titled "Trump Proposes Unprecedented Budget Cuts to US Science." So this is Nature's take on this. So the article states that the cuts could severely impact U.S. Competitiveness and the scientific pipeline itself from the U.S. And NSF. It gives us some numbers. NSF could face up to 56% funding reduction. The National Institute of Health might see 40%, and the Environmental Protection Agency could have a 55% reduction. And NASA could get a 24% reduction. So these are all significant. I mean, from a purely science point of view, I'm so disappointed with, I mean, medicine, because of my background in medicine, the NIH cut, as well as, I'm a big space exploration enthusiast, and so NASA receiving a cut. But overarching cuts, as in the story is that this is a very bad sign, and there could be a lot of, as we will talk about soon, brain drain happening from researchers who are
Yeah,
not quite happy with continuing their research careers in the US.
my concern about this is the kind of how this fundamentally impacts on the kind of the whole infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
Because this administration's 4 years, and if there's a new administration in 4 years' time, it's not going to be day one things come back to normal. It's going to take years, if it happens at all, for that to restore the positions that we were in even sort of 2-3 years ago.
Right.
So I'm concerned about the long term, future of some of these programs. How can you cut? How can they cut health funding by 40%? It just seems so strange to me.
Very true indeed. And this is, I mean, the changing field and the changing sort of market and requiring publishers to adopt new strategies is very important, at least in the last 6 months or so. And this is why I think, some of the things that I think we offer consultancy services to publishers
I
in
was just
terms.
going to say,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of ways. If you're a publisher or if you're a researcher and you're looking for perhaps new publishing partners or new research partners, there are things that we can do through our consulting services or through our expert services, particularly in places like China, where maybe we can give you some guidance and advice.
Excellent, excellent. And moving on to, I think, Tony, we only have three main stories because we have a bunch of stories to cover as quick hits. So this one is again a wonderful article from the Scholarly Kitchen titled "Ask the Chefs, the NIH Steps on the Open Access Accelerator." So that's a fun title. So this is regarding open access and the policies related to it, policies related to open access for federally funded research from the NIH funding. So we are talking about the Nelson memo, and this policy that they are talking about accelerate the timeline for this memo, which requires immediate free availability of research papers and data.
Yeah,
And so the obviously Rick Anderson and all the other authors talk in detail about this, but some of the concerns that are raised are that the financial and logistical challenges implementing this policy, and they state that librarians will play a crucial role in supporting researchers in terms of compliance with these policy adherence. And there are some authors and researchers who question the impact on small publishers and research societies. As in,
yeah,
when you're talking about open access being freely being made freely available to the public,
yeah,
that could
yeah.
impact small publishers. And
Well,
you've.
you absolutely, if you think about it. There are probably I don't know, something like 2,000 active publishers of scientific journals at the moment, maybe possibly more. If you take some of the open access journals, and some of these publishers are only like small societies with one or two or three journals who can't afford to participate in sort of commercial read and publish programs, who don't necessarily want to license their content to the big publishers because they want to keep control of their own output and their own destiny. And because they can't participate in these big programs, there's no protection for them. So if the Nelson memo mandates that, if you receive an article and it's funded by the US government,
Mm-hmm.
and in some areas that's up to 40% of submissions could be in those areas. Although I suspect that's going to be changing in the coming months and years with some of the changes, some of the cuts. Then you've got nothing to sell.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, I've always had an issue about this, and maybe I see this rather naively. There are all sorts of ways of making content free.
Mm-hmm.
An author there's generally no restriction on an author publishing a version of their paper on an institutional repository. They might want to put a paper up on the preprint before it goes on to like, I don't know, medRxiv, bioRxiv, archive, whatever it might be, whatever, depending on the subject. There's all sorts of ways of making that content available free of charge and pointing users to it.
Mm-hmm.
The journal article is the version of record, and there's a reason for it to be being the journal of record. In terms of those guarantees of quality and assurance of longevity, and that content will always be there and accessible. Now that comes at a cost, and if you start to take away some of those fundamental sort of assumptions, such as there will be revenue to pay those costs, Um,
Right.
so I can sometimes be concerned about the future of some of these small societies because they really won't survive. Or at least they won't survive independently.
Yes, very valid points, Tony. Thanks for bringing it up. And you predicted at the top of this year that transformative agreements are going to be a big sort of, I guess,
Yeah,
topic. And we have
yeah.
seen things like, for example, the Indian government yes, initiated the initiative, the One Nation One subscription policy, and the publishers, especially we just talked about small and medium sized publishers. They should react to it. They need to find new strategies
But they
to
often can't. They don't have the resource often to react to it.
right.
Unless they're part of these large publisher programs,
Right.
they can't. How can they don't have sales teams? They don't have marketing teams. They have very good journals with very high profiles. They have very supportive editorial boards, very supportive authors, but they don't necessarily have that global reach unless they decide to sort of go into a. I mean, and it is perhaps it's inevitable that in order to survive, more and more journals will have to do that.
Right. And you mentioned the global reach, and I would also say that the localized expertise would also matter. And you just mentioned the Charles Firth Expert Services in the context of China and Chinese publishers.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm aware that you yourself are in play a role in terms of offering consultancy services for publishers within India. Could you elaborate a little if somebody is seeking some information regarding that?
Yeah, no, in the same way that we have expert services for China, we can now offer expert services in India if needed. So if a publisher wants to understand how the on-off deal is going to impact on them or what they need to do to participate in future deals, then we have people and resources available that can support them.
Right, and not to mention the the ONOS report that we published a few months ago, actually, which is available. If you want
Yeah,
to take a look at it, any publishers or stakeholders from publishers, anybody
yeah,
in their teams can take a look at it. And if suppose you find something interesting in the report, please reach out to either Tony or me on LinkedIn, and we would like to help you out in strategize.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
All right, Tony, ready for quick hits? We have a bunch
Let's,
of them.
let's yeah.
The first one is an exclusive career news article from Nature. Exclusive, and Nature analysis signals the beginnings of a US science brain drain. And when in our pre-production meeting, you already had a smile. You still have a smile. We talked about the science brain drain. And do you have any opening thoughts before I
No,
read?
apart from this is a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
If funding is going to be cut, researchers are going to worry about the future of their careers. So they're going to look to sympathetic countries to continue their research. If this is an area you've devoted your life to,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden the rug's been pulled away from you, then you're going to look for a new rug to stand on. So I'm absolutely not surprised.
Right, and so the a quick few points from the article. So job seekers are looking abroad due to Trump's science funding cuts. U.S. scientists submitted 32% more applications abroad in early 2025, and
I'm
job
surprised it's that low.
yes, even I am. Job views abroad increased by 35% in the same period, and the month of March, saw a 68% increase in job views abroad compared to last year. And
Yeah.
European institutions are attracting US scientific talent. We actually are covering another story, a very related one. And wait, I cannot pronounce the name of the university. Can you? The A. Marcel
Aix Marseille.
Aix Marseille
I think
University.
I think it's I think it's I or Aix Marseille. Aix Marseille. I think
Yeah, so
Marseille definitely, but Aix Marseille I think it is.
Aix-Marseille University launched an initiative to support US researchers. That's wonderful.
One
Uh,
of many. One of
yeah,
many.
yeah. Applications to European jobs from the US increased by 32%. Are you surprised that it is low as well?
Not at all surprised at all. But the comment earlier on March saw a 68% increase in job views
Right,
abroad
right,
compared to last year. That's more like the sort of figures I'm not surprised at.
right. And finally, Max Planck Society in Germany seeks to collaborate with US institutions. So this is all this what the article says. Tony, we in the pre-production meeting we talked about the primary destination or attraction of US outgoing US scientists to be Europe. You believe that it's not just Europe?
I don't think it's just Europe. I know it's absolutely not Europe. You see American researchers going into Australian institutions, into South America. Brazil is opening up again now.
Mm-hmm.
I think Europe is perhaps one of the more common ones because there are so many opportunities here or
Right.
potential opportunities here. But I think this is a global trend.
Right. So this is the related story, which again I'll probably read out only the exclusive points. So as we mentioned in the previous story, European institutes are stepping up to save U.S. science data. So the article is titled "Major European Institutes Join Race to Save U.S. Science Data." So this is regarding data saving. And
Yeah,
so the data sets are at a threat because Trump administration's funding cuts are leading to this sort of, nobody knows if the data is going to be backed up or saved. And German institutes like Pangea are actively backing up at risk databases. The US National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration NOAA's data is vital for weather forecasting and environmental research. That is also
yeah,
a concern. And concerns arose over potential data loss due to contract cancellations with Amazon Web Services. I mean, Tony, you and I are aware a lot of companies use Amazon Web Services like us for running their
we do.
basic
Yeah,
services. And if
yeah,
if suppose there is a funding issue, then all of these may come to a halt, which is not great for
yeah.
any situation, especially for global researchers who are collaborating.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And it doesn't just impact on US research, it impacts on global research. You know, if
right,
these big data sets disappear, some of these research activities, some of these programs that day to day, we just take for granted, also suddenly disappear.
right.
Imagine not being able to do effective weather forecasting or environmental research because NOAA data is no longer available. It beggars belief.
Right, right. All right.
And I
So,
think it's a good example of that the whole sort of the global nature of the research ecosystem. If one market fails, another picks it
mhm,
up, and hopefully this is what's going to happen here. Is
right.
that if these access to the US resources disappear, that somebody in Europe, somewhere in Europe, like Pangaea, for
Mm.
example, will be able to pick up the baton and keep on running.
Right, right. And I'm very happy to say that the Lancet or journal that I looked up to when I was in medical profession has an editorial title supporting medical science in the USA. It is a reaction to the executive orders by the Trump administration. So it highlights the tension between between scientific independence and governmental interference. The article suggests that such government actions are meant to intimidate and control scientific discourse, and the proposed budget cuts to the NIH and the CDC could weaken the US scientific infrastructure. We have talked about it, but it also sort of lets research. I mean, it passes on the message that we cannot just remain silent, and the researchers have to sort of fight to ensure that disparity or the imbalance in terms of the independence of science is restored back to where it should be. Your
Yeah,
thoughts?
but how long is it going to take? If there is a change in administration in 4 years' time, how long is it going to take to restore that balance?
Right.
That's the thing that scares me. This isn't just a 4 year program. This is potentially a long term problem that's going to have to be solved.
Well, it is true, but what I am trying to say is that without, let's say, prominent journals expressing their views,
Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
this will not happen because of blogs generally written across the internet. It has to be places or established brands like the Lancet standing up for what research should stand up for, and helping the cause, and so that we can accelerate the cycle. Everything is cyclical, Tony. That's what I believe in. Even the bad and the good in life and society as
yeah.
well. So I believe that this sort of action across the, let's say, publishers and journals might help turn things around faster.
And it fundamentally impacts on the US's ability to be seen as the
Yeah.
leader in fundamental research and basic research.
Yeah, and especially with Chinese research breathing down its
Yeah,
neck. Yeah, it's
absolutely.
very relevant.
And I think we'll overtake.
Right, right. Let's see. And another, interestingly, I've got the first article from an Indian news source. This is one of my favorite sources of news related to India primarily. But this is an article about the U.S. Or the Trump administration. So Trump's attack. It's titled "Trump's Attack on Academia," unsettling reminder that it's happened in India and elsewhere before. So it's basically that's it's a cyclical nature of such things. The experiences of academic bias in India and the US are being shared by the author of the article, and the research on several controversial topics within the Indian political scheme has received hostility from political groups. Academic freedom in India is increasingly threatened by political influence, and similar trends of restricting social sciences were observed in Japan as well. So resistance exists, but it's often weak and effective. In the sense, researchers are not united to resist this, and that's what we were talking about regarding
Yeah,
the Lancet article as well. And Western academia sometimes offers refuge for some researchers who are facing such problems in let's say Southeast Asia, and it generally calls for a collective academic resistance against autocratic policy. So I couldn't agree more. I might be on the left side of the spectrum, but at the same time, this is what science needs, is what I firmly believe in, Tony.
I think that science needs, all views, a
Right.
balanced view, and but it also needs those opposed to stand up and speak against it.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, you're right.
Right. And this also, I mean, I just, yesterday I had a conversation with a colleague internally, and we were talking about whether we should, as you know, we are far separated, as in, we in the sense, the people who work in India office, and we are thinking about what to talk about in terms of what would attract researchers' attention in terms of, blogs, etc. And somebody brought up the point that DEI, because it's such a controversial topic, should not be talked about in the context because Trump policies are against it. And I was of the opinion that we should not stop talking about it if it's relevant, and especially considering that our flagship writing assistant product Trinka offers the DEI inclusivity accessibility checks as well. So, what are your thoughts on that? As it should
I,
let's say the rest of the world stop talking about DEI?
I don't think so. Just because one government has one particular position, one particular policy, doesn't directly influence
Right.
anyone else elsewhere. At the minute we stop talking about DEI is when it's not an important issue for the publishers that we work with in terms of how they build their own journals and books.
Right. All right, moving on to the next story. It's a New York Times article citing NIH cuts a top science journal stops accepting submissions. So we are talking about the journal Environmental Health Perspectives, which has paused new submissions due to funding cuts. And so the funding is from the NIH, and it has been crucial for its operations. This is what I think, Tony, you talked about when we discussed the points from the scholarly kitchen article as well. And this decision could limit access to valuable environmental health research, and other journals like the emerging infectious diseases face similar threats. So this is again, it's a negative article from the point of view, especially public health, which is very important considering that there could be a pandemic anytime, and that's how the world is going these days. So what are your thoughts on this? I mean, you've already explained a lot, but still,
I'm not sure how much more I've got to say on this. Really,
right,
it's such a challenging issue. It's almost like we're sort of taking one step forward and taking 10 steps back in terms of how we protect and add value to kind of some of the great research and researchers that we have working
right,
to support us and support our health
mm-hmm.
programs around the world. We as a company, we will help researchers in terms of communicating their research, regardless of how they may, we can advise them, we can help how they prepare their content. We can maybe even from time to time help them in terms of how they put their content together.
Mm-hmm.
But there has to be that desire to want to be able to communicate that research, and the feeling that's not going to affect what they do isn't going to affect their career long term.
Right, right. All right, we talked about publishers launching campaigns and initiatives. So Emerald Publishing has launched, I think, the hashtag Defend Research campaign, which is wonderful. It pushes for academic freedom and against censorship with the Defend Research initiative. So everybody is facing challenges because of the geopolitical instability and funding cuts. So Emerald has partnered with every library to support libraries and academic librarians. So they provide resources for advocating academic freedom and offer downloadable assets and emphasize the importance of global research collaboration in for societal advancements. Very, very admirable, I would say. Very, very just, I would say, proper response. Your thoughts on the
Well,
hash?
for what the thoughts and the comment. The comment first. Every library is not every library in the world. Every library is an organisation,
Mm-hmm.
and Emerald is partnering with this particular organisation to support libraries and academic libraries. So they've not got to deal with every library in the world.
Right,
So it's just with this organisation called Every Library.
right,
I absolutely, because there's a mandate in the US, it doesn't mean to say, that those executive orders directly influence what happens outside of the US.
right.
And we know in reality it does, but these are US political activities that are taking place at the moment, and research should not be political.
Right, and Cope has another statement regarding this. So this is titled Cope Statement on External Influence on Editorial Decisions. So this emphasizes editorial independence and academic freedom, just like what we talk about with the Emerald article. It Cope
Yeah,
opposes undue influence from political, corporate, and social entities.
right.
It
Yeah,
expresses support of authors, editors, and publishers facing external pressures and has resources and guidelines on editorial independence and handling censorship. And finally, COPE stresses that publication choices should not be influenced by external policies except when legal compliance is needed. Absolutely bang on target. It's like
yeah.
a Yorker.
As you would expect from Cope.
Yes, yes, yes. It's so wonderful. So I mean, this is probably the summary of all the last few articles that we talked about. It's wonderful. I don't know if you have any further thoughts on this, apart from the fact that you know that, I mean, we talk about Cope being such a sort of leader, the flag bearer in terms of all such publication ethics related things.
Yeah,
Mm.
and in case you don't know who COPE is the Committee on Publication Ethics. So they're basically they're setting the standards for good practice in
Mm.
academic publishing. Um, and editorial independence, academic freedom is essential to good practice.
Right.
Politics shouldn't be influencing the kind of research that's going on. Research, the needs of mankind should be impacted, should be influencing what research takes place.
Right. Moving on.
So no, I support this. And again, if you're a researcher and you want to understand how those COPE guidelines might impact on you and your research, talk to Inago, because we've got all sorts of AI tools and human resources that will help you to understand what you need to do to make sure that your content is meeting those guidelines.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for that. And we are moving on to our last quick hit. It's from the Science Editor blog. It's an essay titled Scientific Communication in a New US Government Regime, What We Need to Consider Now. So it's from a researcher point of view primarily. So this is the author shares her insights as from based on her experience as a former science editor. And there are two executive orders named, and this was the first time I got to know about these. So these are the executive orders 14151, and I think the second one is down below somewhere. So it is
14168.
yeah. So 14151 targets DEI programs affecting federal government departments, and 14168, I think it's coming. Yeah, there you go. Aims to restore the biological truth, impacting funding and publications related to gender and DEI. So
Yeah,
first of all, I wanted to bring to our audience's attention and general attention to the fact that there are these executive orders with numbers that you can study further if you want to know more about it. And
right.
the overarching sort of concern expressed is that the future of scientific research and the potential decline in the quality due to these funding cuts, which we have talked about in detail in today's episode and previous episode. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I just don't have anything much to say apart from the fact that I at least I hope, Tony, that this cycle will reverse at least in the next U.S. administration cycle, where funding will be restored back to how things used to be.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, there's nothing more I can say apart from this is just another example how these funding cuts is directly impacting the profile, the nature, and the ability for US researchers to do their work effectively.
Right, right. So that brings us to the end of this episode. Tony, anything interesting happening in your music world? Any new guitars? Anything new with equipment?
No. I had a gig. I performed at the weekend.
Uh-huh.
I'm a member of a folk orchestra. I suppose the best way of describing it. And we had a concert at the weekend at a very very nice church
Mm-hmm.
in Bristol, here in Bristol. Yeah.
Excellent. Do you have good what kind of amplifiers do you have to?
I have various amplifiers, mostly Marshalls, but I've got a Boss amplifier and
Katana?
uh, no, I haven't got a Katana. No, two Marshalls and a Boss that
Yeah.
I have at the moment.
Right.
What about you?
I'm planning to get a. I mean, I've got a Laney combo. I mean, no, it's a separate, as in with a cabinet. A big fat bass amp, which I just got serviced, Tony, after 17 years. I got the first service done because there were some problems with it.
Yeah.
And it sounds amazing. It sounds amazing, especially with my new P bass. And I've got a Katana MK2 guitar amp, and I'm planning to buy a busking amp. Would you believe
Oh
that
right.
I'm considering busking in
I
Bombay?
beg your pardon. I've actually also got a small Yamaha busking amp as well, a little portable busking amp. It's loud as heck. It's only like 15 watts, but it blows. Really, you wouldn't believe.
And have you gone busking?
No, I don't do busking, but occasionally I need to plug in with a little amp just to give when I finger pick, for example.
Mm-hmm.
When I strum, I don't need to be plugged in, but when I finger pick, it needs a little bit more lift.
Right. So the audience who are curious know how you finger pick and how you play with your guitars and amps. Where can they find more about you, all this
They
information?
won't find anything about my guitar playing anywhere online, but they can find out more about me over at on LinkedIn. Just search for or KK or me. We're
Mm.
both available on LinkedIn, or you can contact me directly at tonyo@anago.com.
All right, all right. So, and as Tony mentioned, we all the episodes, including the 67th episode of Pop Shots, will be available on the YouTube Inago channel under the Pop Shots playlist, and you can find all the episodes if you're interested in being entertained, as Tony said, for weeks. If you would play all of them back to back, and if you have any
It would take a while.
yes, entertainment taking a while is good, I think, as the last time I checked. So, and if you have any thoughts and if you have any suggestions in terms of what you would like Tony and I to cover, please let us know in the YouTube comment thread or on maybe LinkedIn, or maybe write an email to us. And we always take your feedback seriously, and we try to incorporate what we learned or what you requested in our podcasts so far. So until the next time, this is Dr. KK signing off on behalf of Tony and the rest of the team members who help us bring such content to you. We will see you in the next one. Bye, Tony.
See you in the next one.